Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360, Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. And please rate and review the show. I'm your host, Wim Lu. And today, even though it's Wednesdays, we're going to just rebrand it. All right? It's Pound the Rock Wednesdays. I'm joined by my beloved longtime crew, Joseph Casciaro and Joe Wolfond, both from The Score. Cash, how you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having us. Happy to be here as always.
Big win last night.
Big win for the Score FC last night.
Huge.
With Will between the pipes. Will putting up a clean sheet, a shutout in net.
You know what? That's what I do. That's what I do. Even though we don't have a full-time goalkeeper, but if I keep doing this, we might have to adjust. And then Joe Wolfond with a fresh cut. How you doing?
Great, man. Privileged to be here as always.
Wow. Did you appreciate the slander from last week or last time you were on about the cuts?
What was the slant? I don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Actually, we're gonna skip past it then. That's good that we don't know. Okay, look, listen. We're gonna talk. Honestly, usually when I have you guys on, because you guys cover the entire league, we usually try to go around the league. But I think for this episode in particular, I really want to get your thoughts on the Raptors too, because obviously you guys are very close Raptors observers. I see you guys in the arena, and I know in your heart of hearts, you guys are Raptor fans. I know you guys are unbiased and everything like that, but the things I have seen at 500 King West, especially when the Raptors missed those tip-ins in Game 1. Well, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, listen, let's just dive into some of these things, because for me right now, as I'm looking at the team, especially coming off this rough stretch here where, they lose in that fashion to Brooklyn and then New Orleans, and then they come back against Orlando, but Orlando's so bad. And then they play the Celtics. The Celtics clearly had another year the Raptors couldn't match. And that game was close, but, ultimately they lost. And the way I'm thinking about it now, especially because they're at, 500 now, it's just like, were our expectations just a little bit too high? And Cash, I'll start with you. Am I just being a little bit too pessimistic on that front? Or did we perhaps overestimate what the Raptors could be capable of this year?
No, I'd say you're being a little pessimistic early in the season. I think, personally, my expectations were that they could contend for a top 4 seed,
okay, maybe
have home court advantage in the first round, and contend to get to the second round. I came into the year thinking Milwaukee and Boston were the class of the East. I still think that, with Boston at, head and shoulders above everyone else. But I think those were justifiable expectations coming into the season, and I still think they're fine. I mean, they're 3 games out of third. I think, not to make excuses for the way the Raptors have played. I mean, they need to be better, and I think everyone knows that. But I'd say that if you look around the league right now, and this is something I wrote about, did videos about for the Score coming into the year, the league, whether you looked at betting odds coming into the year or whether you looked at projection systems, the league has literally never been this balanced. And it's never been this jumbled near the top either. And so I think you're seeing it around the league. That in and of itself makes the night-to-night consistency across the league almost non-existent this year, other than maybe a Boston or that's pretty much it, actually. They're the only team that's really been that consistent. I mean, the Warriors are 2-10 on the road. The Warriors look like they're figuring it out, and then they lose to the Halliburton-less Pacers at home. The Heat look awful. The Sixers are at 500. The Mavs look awful, and then sweep a back-to-back in Phoenix and Denver. Between the balance at the top of the league and also the injuries that have just kind of run roughshod over the league to start the year, I think this kind of first quarter season, more than any other season we've ever seen, it's just really hard to take too much away, good or bad, from teams. And again, the Raptors have to be better. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
I would just caution people this season especially to read too much into what teams are doing good or bad in this first quarter season, because I just think the league's very topsy-turvy right now.
What were the expectations coming into the year? I'm not entirely clear on what obviously it depends who you ask, right? But Cash, we did an episode before the season started where I laid out the reasons why I thought that the Raptors would underperform. And even on that episode, I feel like we struggled to actually come up with a proper definition of what the expectations for the team were. But my feeling coming in was they were going to have pretty much the same limitations that they had last year. I think that's really borne out. And so if the expectations were that they were going to overcome those limitations and, get themselves into that upper echelon where they were legitimately contending, then yeah, I think that was unrealistic. I'm with Cash in that, it's been mixed for them, just like it's been for most teams around the league. And like I'm looking at it, okay, they're 12-12. They're 13th in offense, which is a borderline miracle for reasons that we can get into. 7th in defense, tied for 11th in net rating, against a pretty tough schedule with all the injuries that they've already dealt with and some of the underperformance from certain guys that I think we can expect to rebound at least a little bit.
Yeah.
I think you look at all that and you say the sky is definitely not falling right now. And by the same token, like you look at some of the other indicators and, you know, one of the things that I like to track, and it was an issue last season, and it's you can totally look at it two ways, right? You can say it's really concerning that the Raptors have to kind of achieve these very miraculous feats of engineering in order to overcome these limitations. Or you can say the fact that they've actually managed to be, you know, a team that outscores its opposition despite those limitations mean that, you know, if they can find a way to address them even a little bit, then the ceiling for this team could be quite high. But like right now, they're 29th in the league in true shooting percentage, 54.7%, which is great. Like I remember when that was league average, like, not even that long ago. Yeah, so they're 29th in true shooting, and they're 28th in true shooting percentage allowed. That is at 59.4%. So that differential is like the biggest negative differential in terms of shooting efficiency of any team other than the Spurs in the league right now, who by pretty much any objective measure are the worst team in basketball. So that's worrying, especially for a team like as defensively talented as we know the Raptors to be 28th in true shooting percentage allowed. Their defensive shot profile is a complete mess. And it's not like they're getting unlucky with opponent shooting, right? Like opponents have actually shot pretty much exactly league average on the types of shots the Raptors have conceded so far. They're just conceding the wrong kind of shots. A ton of corner threes, as we know, a lot of shots at the rim. And, you know, that's concerning. Like there are all these red flags. And then you look at like the ways that they've managed to kind of overcome those things. And it's by the same token, very, very impressive. Like the biggest way they've managed to do that is just by winning the possession battle to an absurd degree, to an even greater degree than they did last year, which was already absurd.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, you can always look at it one of two ways. You can say, look, their ability to do this, to repeat this, is a really good sign. All they need to do is like, you know, address these limitations in some form or fashion, and they could really take off. But obviously, addressing those things is a lot easier said than done. And given the roster makeup right now, I think that's going to be kind of hard to do.
Well, I mean, that's a really interesting point, right? Because to me, that kind of speaks to an overall organizational philosophy in terms of how they build the team, and also even a coaching philosophy for how they want to approach that team. So when you think about it, does that make sense? Does it feel like it's the best that you're going to get out of this roster, or the most optimal way you're going to play with this roster to, you know, be that team that obviously gets you 10 extra shots a game, but the penalty of that is that you don't shoot well and your opponents shoot really well?
I mean, given the roster makeup right now, I feel like it's kind of hard to argue. Like
Okay.
I have felt at various points that they could stand to scale back the aggressiveness on defense a
Sure.
little bit.
You're even hearing Nick get questioned about it pre-games, because it was like before the Celtics game. You know, the reporters were asking Nick, like, hey, you know, what makes the Celtics so good at defense, Nick? And he's like, well, you know, they switch a lot. They do play a lot of good one-on-one coverage. And he's like, do you think you can do that? Like, it was literally like that.
Well, but it's funny to look at the Celtics as a counterpoint, right?
Sure,
Because they
yeah.
force no turnovers. They're dead last in the league in opponent turnover rate, right? So
No, they just play you straight up. They switch everything, but mostly everything, but they just play you straight up.
they keep the ball in front.
Yeah.
Right? Like they don't.
It's like the Clippers model, too.
And
you know who's a good candidate, who you'd wish you had on your team to be able to play straight up on defense? OG Anunoby.
yeah, but
The Raptors have
you know
a guy
what?
that
in that game
they
against the
can
Celtics,
play straight up.
In that game against the Celtics, they let them do it way more than they've done
Yes,
at
yeah.
various points this season, right? Like they did not show nearly as much help, specifically for OG's assignments. I feel like, than you know, as they usually do.
Yeah, Tatum and Brown, I think both had 20-plus shots, which is not usually what you would see.
And I honestly think the defense as a whole, like there was some crazy Celtic shot making. There were definitely some breakdowns, especially in that third quarter. But on the whole, I thought that was a pretty damn good defensive game that the Raptors played against
I agree.
the best offense in basketball maybe ever. Like, I think there are ways that they could stand to scale it back. But But I don't know, like in terms of a broader basketball philosophy, I don't know if Nick can stomach that. And then you get into the like rim protection by committee that they have to do because they're lacking that one overwhelming, 7-foot rim protector. Christian Koloko is not that guy yet. So that is what opens them up to those kind of kickouts and corner threes, like the amount of help they have to send to the middle of the floor. And it's not working right now. Like their opponents are shooting 70% at the rim. And that's basically what they did last year too. So it's something eventually I feel like they're going to have to address.
The Dallas game was a perfect example of this kind of, push and pull where early in that game, I know I had tweeted about it too, where like OG was doing a fine job on Luka Doncic, and yet they were still sending so many extra bodies at him. And it was resulting in a lot of open Mavs threes, mostly from the corners. And that's how Dallas got out to that, whatever it was, like 15-point lead, like 4 minutes into the game, whatever it was. Yeah. But lo and behold, by the end of the game, it had worked. The Raptors end up winning. The Raptors bet on the fact that those guys were not going to beat them if they didn't allow Luka Doncic to beat them, and it worked. But as much as I agree with it here and there, it's like, how often can you really bank on that, right? And again, I think when you've got the luxury of an OG Anunoby, you have to let him loose defensively in those matchups. And it doesn't mean there's not going to be help at all, but I just think they can be a lot more selective and disciplined with that help so that, okay, fine, a Nick Nurse defense is going to give up a lot of corner threes because of that, aggression and over-helping on defense, but I don't think it has to be to this degree, I think there's a middle ground somewhere that they have to find.
And it's also about mixing it up. And, like, that can be a tough scheme to play against, just with, like, constantly seeing all the extra bodies, constantly facing ball pressure, the way that the Raptors can rotate and close space. Like, it can be a lot to deal with, but that can also be easy to scheme around if you know that it's coming. And if you do deploy it a little bit more selectively, then I feel like it's actually going to be that much more effective when you do deploy it because they're not going to see it coming. It's going to like throw an offense out of sorts rather than an offense that comes into a game 100% prepared to face exactly that coverage.
Well, I mean, I think that was one of those signatures of Nick's, especially when you think of that year where he won Coach of the Year, right, when the Raptors trying to defend the title. So much of it was about that creativity on defense, just like he showed during, obviously, that championship season as well. But like that next season, it was so much like, wow, I can't believe they held Dame to single digits. And then Kawhi had like 9 turnovers. And then,
fronting Harden at half court.
Fronting Harden at half court and LeBron. And they had all these like innovative, like Joel Embiid scored 0 points. Although that was, that was a bit strange actually. But that was his signature, was like that creativity that caught teams by, surprise. And now you consistently see stars being like, oh, I know what's going to happen when I go to Toronto. And to Nick's credit, he did scale it back against the Celtics because, as he explained post-game, he's like, yeah, they have a lot of shooters who in the corners are like 65% true shooting. So I'm not going to like leave the corner shooters
also,
open.
The Celtics shooting to start this season, like, don't get me wrong. I know they're good. They are the best team in basketball right now. But some of this is not going to hold up over the course of the year. Like, their jump shooting numbers across the board, top to bottom in that roster, are insane right now. That is just not sustainable.
They got 9 guys in their rotation above 60% in true.
Yeah, it's insane.
The Raptors have 0.
I think the Celtics are a good, not comparable in terms of roster construction or anything, but I do think, kind of what I was ranting about when we started the show about how it's early and it's maybe a little too early for pessimism. I think people forget a lot of times how long a season is, and that 11 months ago, the Celtics were 500, seemingly dysfunctional team that maybe they had to make a move and break up Tatum and Brown, whatever it was. And then a few months later, they were in the finals, and now we're talking about them as a juggernaut. And that entire, turnaround happened in less than a year with very minimal roster changes made. So not that I'm saying that's the Raptors' future over the next calendar year, but it is a reminder to people that it's still early. It's December, and I don't think we really have a gauge on what this team or a lot of the teams around the league are yet.
No, that's fair. I think that's a good perspective. Well, listen, I think to the topic of expectations, right? The reason I wanted to ask this, because for me, it was like my reasoning for why the Raptors were going to be taking the next step from 48 wins last season to maybe 50, maybe a little bit above 50, not high 50s, but low 50s, was that, number one, it was a young roster. You expected some natural growth with that the squad, that, certain guys on the team would take a step forward, right? You would expected better health, which I don't think has really happened yet, but, at least at that time, I was thinking, well, some of these things were not repeatable issues. So hopefully better health. I think I specifically was thinking about Fred. And to be honest, Fred's health has not ever really looked the same. So I was definitely wrong on that. And then I just thought about the fact that they had a lot of games where it felt like it was inexperienced. A lot of like under 500 teams they just weren't taken care of. I think they're actually done better on that front this season. But those are my 3 reasons for like why they would just win like a couple more games. And right now, obviously they're not at that pace, but they could eventually get there. I think the biggest thing to me is though, it's like the players taking a step forward this season. Have you seen that from certain guys on this roster or not? Because, there was a pretty young team and they had gone off to a pretty good start. Naturally, you expect that young team to continue improving, but I don't know. When I'm looking at the young guys on the roster, I'm not seeing that many tangible differences from last year.
Pascal and OG obviously have had great starts to the year. I don't think you can ask for much more from them.
Sure, yeah.
But then I guess if the true blue young guys, if you want to call them that, like Scotty has had an uneven start, which isn't, dissimilar to a lot of the other sophomores in the league. And then Precious didn't get off to the start anyone envisioned for him and then got hurt. So I think Scotty and Precious are what probably a lot of fans would say have been some of the early season disappointments. But at the same time, it's been offset by how good Pascal and OG have been. I mean, Wolfond, you can jump in here too, but I'd say for me, the biggest, I don't know if it's disappointment or just letdown, but a lot of it's just shooting is Gary and Fred. And Fred most of all, whether it's a back issue that he dealt with early in the season, then he was sick, or maybe it's just, you're going to wait for regression to the mean. And over the course of the season, Fred will start shooting it again, like I think he will. Same with Gary. But, I don't think anyone would consider those guys necessarily young up-and-comers. Well, Gary more so, yeah, is still a young player that has room to grow. But with Fred, it's not that anyone was expecting like a breakout. He's already had that. He was an all-star. But I think they expected him to be more healthy and just to shoot the way everyone knows he can. Because when you really look at this team so far this season, and I don't want to make it so simplistic, but a lot of the issues would be resolved, especially on offense, especially the way Pascal's creating for himself and others in the half court. A lot of the issues would be resolved if Fred, and to a lesser extent Gary, were just shooting and playing the way they're capable of. Fred's like a career 38% three-point shooter that's down at 34. Gary's a career almost 39% three-point shooter that's down at 33. And those are guys who collectively combined for like 15 three-point attempts per game.
Yeah.
If they're just near their averages.
Yeah, even OG's shooting below his
right.
averages.
And that's what I'm saying. And then given the leap in half-court creation Pascal has made, I actually think a lot of the offensive issues would be somewhat solved if Fred and Gary were just shooting the way they could. And maybe you just have to hope for a regression to the mean in that sense.
I agree to an extent, and I do think Fred will bounce back. And I think, people are really hard on Fred when he struggles, and it's visible because of how much they rely on him.
Yeah,
and it's a shame because even when he's struggling to shoot the ball, I still think that he contributes in a lot of different ways. But this team construction, like, they need him to hit his shots, and so it really does stick out like a sore thumb when he's not hitting them. But even apart from that, like, I just think ultimately you don't want to be as reliant on Fred's shot creation as the Raptors currently are. And I think about, like, you look at some of their numbers, and this is, again, carryover from last year, where they are one of, like, the highest frequency isolation teams in the league and one of the very worst teams at actually converting in isolation situations. And mind you, like, that's just about scoring efficiency and not about the kind of looks that you're able to create out of isolation. Like, if you include passes, then especially with Pascal and the way that he's able to draw help in ISO, those numbers look better. But, like, 4th in isolation frequency, 28th in ISO scoring efficiency, like 8th in pull-up jump shots per game, dead last in effective field goal percentage on pull-up jumpers. It's like they're not getting to any kind of like good offensive process. And I think you're seeing the limitations of a team that just doesn't have a whole lot of shot creation, a whole lot of pull-up jump shooting equity. And it just makes it a lot more difficult. Like, the ways that they're able to create good looks, it's just a whole lot more arduous than a team like Boston that can come in and just be like, I mean, not that their offensive process has been bad by any means, but like they got guys who can just come in and like run a pick and roll and either walk into a pull-up three or get 2 on the ball and open something up elsewhere. I think about, like, even watching that game, I mean, it really hit me how much even somebody like Marcus Smart, who has never been lauded for his offense, like how much a guy like that would help the Raptors.
Yeah.
Just in terms of his ability to create off of the bounce. Like, there's just not enough of that on this team right now, and it spotlights, the struggles that somebody like Fred can have, which everybody goes through struggles, at various points in any season. And again, I think his shooting is going to rebound, but even when it does, like, there are still those same limitations with Fred that there have always been when it comes to his ability to score inside the arc. Like, I think we saw a little bit of progression in terms of his, like, in between scoring last year, where he was hitting from long mid range. He had, like, some signs of a floater game coming along, and that's kind of fallen by the wayside. That's almost been more disappointing to me than the 3-point shooting, because I feel like that was such an important element for him to be able to add when going up against drop coverage. But I also think, like, he's being asked to do so much, and that's without even getting into, like, the situation with his backups that barely ever play,
right?
And the minutes load and the ball handling load and all the things that led to him wearing down last year. And maybe we're just seeing that issue get compounded now again.
Yeah, I mean, the backup issue is definitely an issue.
Like, it's nasty. Nick didn't even play any of them against the Celtics, which I don't think he should have.
Exactly. I'm done with people making excuses for Malachi. Look, Malachi Flynn does not look like an NBA rotation player. I'm sorry. He doesn't seem quick enough to beat anybody off the dribble. Like, he can't beat anybody off the dribble. Doesn't seem that strong. He's supposed to be able to shoot, but his shot has been pretty inconsistent. Like, for a long time, I think there was a lot of people making the excuse where he's not getting the opportunity to develop, or, like, the minutes aren't consistent enough. But at a certain point, you got to win those minutes, man. And, like, this season, there's been opportunity to win those minutes, and he hasn't done that. So, like, I don't really know what people want Nick to do in that regard, because I see people complain about Fred's minutes all the time. And it's like, are you not watching the same team and the same games that I'm watching or that we're watching? They need Fred VanVleet out there. Even a diminished Fred VanVleet, they desperately need him out there, because there is no one else in that guard rotation that can do what he does, or that comes close to playing winning basketball when he's not on the court. So what's the other option?
I think the other option is just to take a bit of a longer view and think, maybe in a single game situation, you have to be prepared to potentially lose a winnable game for some longer term gain. Whether that means just I actually think Malachi's been okay in the minutes that he's been able to play this season, but I think it's got to be really hard for him to build up any kind of confidence or rhythm when he'll go from having, a pretty strong game, getting, 20, 25 minutes, to getting DNP 3 games in a row, and I think giving him a little bit longer leash and being willing to potentially swallow some short-term pain, especially because I don't think, like, I know the Raptors have ambitions and they want to show progression and get better, but I don't think, as they're currently constructed, they have realistic ambitions of, like, contending for a championship, right? So I think, like, they should be willing to see what they have, see what they can get from Malachi if they give him a little bit more rope. Like, same with Delano, right? Like, and I think there's a scenario in which that actually allows you to get more out of Fred in the hopefully scaled down minutes that he's on the floor.
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of speaks to the idea that, like, what is the direction this season, right? Are they trying to push for it and be more competitive than they were last season? When you look at the additions, most recent signings are all veterans. Like Thad's, I mean, that wasn't a signing, it was a trade, but it was kind of like a delayed sign and trade, let's just say. Otto is a veteran coming off of a championship. Juancho's been in the league a long time. It wasn't like people were expecting Juancho to come in here and grow a ton in his game. We kind of knew what he was about. And, again, when you think about the franchise, they're really always talking about winning, but they're also talking development. Now, I think you could kind of do both at the same time, but sometimes you get into that Celtics game, you're like, well, we just want to win. Like, we just had a team meeting, right? We want to give them our best shot. Our best shot includes putting our best players on the floor, which means none of the young guys play. But yeah, to your point, like, none of the young guys really have played. And that's the thing for me that's been disappointing to the first, like, quarter of the season. Is just like, I wanted to see more growth from guys. I needed to see key growth from Scotty, from Precious, to a lesser degree, Delano. I thought Delano had a really nice summer. Summer league was strong, went to represent Canada. He was good in preseason. He was the Raptors' like best bench player in preseason. It was like, okay, I understand that these are all like just less competitive games than the NBA, of course, but some kind of progression on that front. We haven't seen it from him. Malachi, I just don't even think he fits the Raptors roster, right? Like, you have Masai talking all the time about this league is getting bigger, this league is getting stronger. I'm looking for big players, and then Fred has a 6'9" heart. Have you heard him say Malachi has a 6'9" heart or a 6'9" jump shot?
I haven't heard him make the joke about getting Malachi some stilts like he made You know, he made that
Right.
joke.
Actually, we're gonna get to that clip a little later on too. But it's just like, you know, the young guys on the team haven't really progressed, and then of course they had a Christian, and they're playing him quite a bit too. But to me, they're playing him a lot because they just really need that center to fill out the roster to continue to be competitive right now. And so sometimes I look at the roster and I'm a little confused between the way Nick sort of wants to play it and the way the front office has sort of built it.
I think Masai probably just doesn't ever bring up Malachi because it's a reminder of his greatest draft failure. You know,
More than Bruno?
Yeah, dude, with Desmond Bane going like one pick later.
Oh, yeah, I know. Well,
anyway,
you know, the issue with Desmond Bane is that his arms are 6'6". That was like a large part of the issue. Somehow.
But this is that's a perfect illustration of if you are too narrow-minded, it's fine to have a vision and you like a particular team identity that you want to construct. There's nothing wrong with that, but I don't think you can be like so doctrinaire about it and so committed to that vision that you're closing yourself off to other possibilities and other avenues that could be really beneficial for your team. I'm not saying that's like the sole reason they didn't draft Desmond Bane, you know, and that they were being so myopic about it. You know, they might have just really liked Malachi. I'm just saying, like, if that is the reason that you're closing off those possibilities, or that's the reason you're justifying it and being like, well, Desmond Bane didn't fit the vision because of his T-Rex arms, then it's just bad process. Like, that's not the way that you should go about building your team. And I'm really glad you brought up the 2019-20 team where they had, like, that to me, that's the most versatile Raptors defense that I've ever watched.
Yep.
Okay? And that team started Fred VanVleet, Kyle Lowry, and Marc Gasol.
Yeah.
Two minuscule guards and a big lumbering center.
Right. That was no Vision 6'9" that with that roster.
So it's like, I think the way that people conceptualize it sometimes is like if you have a lot of interchangeable defenders, a lot of switchable defenders, and that's how you build a versatile defense. And that's just not always true. You know, like having a bunch of versatile individual defenders doesn't always amount to a versatile defensive scheme in a team context. And there are a lot of different ways to go about doing that, as the Raptors have proven in the past. And I think it's actually clear that the front office recognizes that to some extent, right? Because if they didn't, we wouldn't be hearing them pop up in rumors involving, you know, like Miles Turner and Jakob Poeltl.
Sure, yeah.
And even Malcolm Brogdon, right? I think they recognize the need to address the limitations on the roster, whether that be, you know, dribble drive, rim pressure, and off the bounce creation, or traditional rim protection. Like, I think they recognized that they have to address those areas. But I just think generally, like, the idea of Vision 9 is nice in theory, but, and I'm not saying that it can't work. Like, just because it hasn't worked doesn't mean it can't. And like, by the same token, just because it can work doesn't mean that it will.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you just always have to be adaptable and looking for like any potential avenue that's going to help your team, no matter what size or shape it comes in.
Man, thinking back on it, Brogdon would have been so perfect.
I've said that, man. Like,
Yeah,
I was
really
like
nice.
hearing that, I was disconsolate, man, because he would have been an absolutely perfect addition for this team. He would have given them everything that they really need. And I mean, like, Nick,
And the fact it was the Celtics of all teams, too.
That's
You know,
tough.
it
Well,
just
but he
makes
was
it-
right though. He was like, "Yeah, I'm trying to go to the best contending situation,"
sure.
and clearly Boston's ahead of
had
Toronto
higher
in that
ambitions,
sense.
man.
his
Well, I
rim
mean, at least with
pressure,
him, I understand.
his combination of like rim pressure, shooting, and that kind of like floor general veteran know-how that could have helped Fred would have just been like chef's kiss.
They could have
on
played
this team.
together in the backcourt because I
Yeah.
thought the Raptors have always looked really good in recent years of just like having two guys who can play a point guard style of play. You divide the court on both sides. There's a lot of like continuity of that, obviously with Fred and Kyle, with Kyle and DeMar over the years, and it just you haven't been able to see that. I guess right now it's technically Pascal and Fred,
Yeah.
but it's not nearly the same. It's totally different. Like Pascal was trying to set up in the post. He's not trying to like break down the defense off a screen and stuff like that. I think that does kind of, you know, raise questions because like obviously I'm not saying we should be out on the Division 6-9 thing. I think this is the way the NBA is going, and it's not just about their heights; it's about their wingspans as well, right? But to me, it's like now that we've seen this experiment for a year and a half now, like what are some of the lessons here in terms of just like how do you complement that kind of, you know, specific roster build? And I think that what you keep coming back to is just you need consistent 3-point shooting, right? Because usually the 6'9" players are not the ones that are consistently delivering 3-point shooting for you, especially not on the Raptors. And then you need a center who will eventually ultimately still plug up gaps at the rim, because otherwise you are rotating a lot, which is not even the idea of the 6'9" thing. The 6'9" thing is the way we conceptualize it is like you switch everything, you keep everyone in front, the way the Celtics play it, the way the Clippers play it. And if Nick's philosophy is I want to double and still bring pressure, that's okay too. But if you want to double and bring pressure, you probably need a 7-footer at the rim to at least make up that gap of mistakes. So, I mean, how do you best complement that vision?
Yeah, because I feel like the fully actualized version, fully realized version of Vision 6'9" is that you don't have to send all that help because you have these versatile, switchable
Right,
defenders.
yeah, yeah.
But in terms to answer your question, I agree with you that they need shooting and rim protection. Now, look, Christian Koloko is a young second round rookie.
Yeah.
I
think
think
he fits
he's
it
shown some
long-term.
like special stuff on the defensive end, but he's also very young. And if they're trying to win this year,
Mhm.
you can't expect him to be that consistent rim protector. You know, he's still prone to fouls and stuff like that. But that's what they need. They need shooting and rim protection if they're actually going to make this Vision 6'9" thing work. And then even with that, like it wouldn't be, it's not like you'd have 5, 6'9" guys on the court because you would have a Fred, you'd have a rim protector that's probably 7 feet. But that's what they need to complement this. And again, I will say if Fred and Gary are shooting the way they're capable of shooting, finding more shooting aspect of it is a little less of a priority, I guess, but they need some combination of shooting and rim protection. I mean, the easy answer is if Miles Turner, is available for nothing, which he obviously is not. I think the Pacers should actually be trying to keep
I
him
agree,
long term
yeah.
because he's still young. But talk about checking both boxes in terms of shooting and rim protection. It's Miles Turner.
Yeah, not a whole lot of guys around the league
No.
who actually do that. But I also think, and we mentioned this the last time we were on talking about missing out on Donovan Mitchell, is addressing the half-court offense could allow you to change the way that you play defense. Because as it is right now, Raptors are dead last in half-court scoring. That's on first shot possessions. Doesn't account for offensive rebounds, but that speaks to how poor they've been when they're going up against set defenses. And that speaks to the requirement of playing in the open floor as much as possible. And the best way to do that is just to force live ball turnovers. So that's part of it. I think if their half-court offense was humming, then maybe they would feel a little bit more comfortable dialing back the pressure and playing things a little bit more straight up. But I do think that, that requires a lot of different things. And yeah, one of them would be Fred shooting the ball better and Gary shooting the ball better. But I do think there's a little bit more to it than that. And it's like, who's breaking a defense down off the bounce? Like I remember Nick talking before the season started about how he really wanted the Raptors to amp up their rim pressure.
Sure, yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's a really nice idea, but A, you got to be able to space the floor in order to like open up those driving lanes and get people to the rim. And then B, like you need to have people who are actually good drivers and finishers. And I think coming into the year, I was like, they have one of those guys.
Yeah.
In Pascal.
That's it.
And this year, I think you could maybe add OG to that conversation, but
He's emerging, but I mean,
It's
again,
like 1.5, I'd say.
so they have 1.5.
When he's not called for travel, then yes.
Yeah, they have 1.5 effective drivers and finishers. And like, even if they had more of them, it would still be a challenge because they have to navigate thickets of help defenders because they can't effectively space the floor. And they've shown that they can find some workarounds to that, one of which is just crashing the hell out of the offensive glass. And they're very fortunate in that they have the athleticism, the size, to be able to do that.
Well, that's a feature of how they built the roster. That's a feature.
It is, for sure. And like that is part of it's fairly cutting edge. Like you around the league right now, offensive rebounding rates are up.
Yep.
And I'm not saying the Raptors are solely responsible for that, but they were ahead of the curve on being like, this is a bit of a tactical inefficiency that we're going to exploit. And now you're seeing a lot of other teams following suit. It's an effective way to not only you're getting extra possessions, right? But like possessions that come after offensive rebounds are some of the most efficient offensive possessions you can get. So there's a big benefit to that. But I also think, if you want to look at the Raptors as being an innovative team, which I think they are, you got to acknowledge like there's a big difference between innovating because you can or because you want to and innovating because you don't really have any other choice. You know what I mean? Like like Picasso still had to learn how to draw or paint in the traditional realist style before he went off and like became a pioneer in the abstract. So like you gotta cover off those bases first, I feel like, before you launch into, being that revolutionary, innovative team. And I feel like right now it's like solely out of necessity that the Raptors are doing this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and this is why I think that, like, when you look at the trade deadline here, like, I'm not looking at the trade deadline as, like, specifically what to add to the roster so that they can make some sort of, like, huge playoff push. Although, obviously, that would be one of the main drivers of why you would make any trade, especially for a winning team. But to me, I'm also thinking about the trade deadline as an opportunity to add talent long term, right? Like, that's why, when it was a trade deadline at Tampa and they ultimately moved Norm Powell and they got Gary Trent, that wasn't about making that team better in Tampa. That was about making sure you had a shooting guard for the next, like, 2 years. And, now I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, we might have to have another, addition at guard, just because of the fact that I was just thinking about it yesterday, and it's, with Gary being demoted to the bench, and with the fact that, like, when they talk about Division 6-9 stuff, they don't really ever talk about Gary. They talk about Fred and, like, hey, well, he's okay. But all the other guys, we want them to be 6'9", and all that stuff. Like, I'm worried about sort of the future of the guard position in Toronto. And I understand that, like, they're trying to move away from it specifically, but we also see the importance of it, right? I really don't believe that you can have that efficient of an offense in the NBA without some quality guards. Like, it's one of the things, that's just how basketball is played. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
so who are some players that you would look at, or even just like the idea or the outlook of a player that you will look for to maybe fit this roster? Because I think, the Raptors really need to look at what they have in the backcourt. It's very, very thin, even though they have a lot of bodies on that team.
I mean, I would say, like, they need a better fifth starter, right? Like, it can't be Christian Coloco. And the idea of moving Gary to the bench is really nice, but if they don't have a better player to replace him with in the starting five, then it's going to be an issue. So whether that fifth starter is a big man, like a Jakob Poeltl type, or another guard, one way or another, I feel like they need an upgrade on that fifth starter spot. So if you're asking about guards, if the Jazz do decide that they want to start selling off pieces and go into the tank, I would be all over Jordan Clarkson. Like, that's the kind of guy. I know he's like a bit of a gunner, but I actually think he's played a lot more selflessly this year, improved as a playmaker, just super creative with the ball in his hands, and a really good shooter. So that's the type of guy. Like, Emmanuel Quickley is apparently, that's like a lower level. He's kind of like a poor man's Jordan Clarkson, but he's apparently available. And
Quickley's more of like a future-minded
Exactly.
guy too.
I'd be all over that too, and especially because, like, the Raptors want to play with pace, and he would fit that perfectly.
Sure, yeah.
It's guys like that, and, like, that might seem like an incremental upgrade, but I think it could have big downstream effects and really help the team a lot.
Yeah, when you said Utah, I was a little afraid because THT, who the Raptors keep getting linked with, for what specific reason I don't understand.
I'm fine, thanks.
That's just another redundancy,
On the Quickley front, just how hilarious would it be if the Knicks have to watch Emmanuel Quickley go to Toronto and blossom? That would be, like, Knicks fans, as if they haven't been tortured enough. Buddy Hield is a guy that's been on the trade block in India. Now, Buddy Hield doesn't really address any of your, like, creation concerns, but in terms of a guy that you can plug in and can shoot, and I think he's under contract for one more year after this one, I think there's definitely some utility there that can help this team. But again, I don't know.
He just seems so, like, different from the way the Raptors want to play. But again, like, that maybe that's the point.
But that's what I'm saying. If you're looking for a guy, I also see it as, like, beggars can't be choosers, right? It depends on what they're trying to address. Like, if they're trying to win in the next year and a half, and I'm not even talking about championship, I just mean, like, if they're still trying to be a very competitive team that can maybe make some noise in the playoffs, like, I think beggars can't be choosers, and they're going to have to – they can't exactly thumb their nose at some of these guys. So would Buddy Hield be my first choice? Absolutely not. Do I think he addresses all of the concerns offensively? Absolutely not. But again, depending on what the price is, if you can plug a guy like that who is, like, an elite shooter, this isn't just a good shooter. That's an absolutely elite shooter that you can plug in that can definitely juice the offense.
Yeah.
And create space for other guys simply just by standing on the court.
Right.
Those are the kind of guys that maybe don't seem like the sexiest names, but they could actually really help this team. And I think the Raptors have to be open-minded to players like that.
Yeah, because
depending on the price.
well, I mean, yeah, exactly, of course, and that's the thing too. Is just like I'm even for the Raptors, I just want some decent guards in the pipeline, right? Like I think we're seeing Fred, and hopefully he can bounce back to where he was before. That would help this problem tremendously. But if he's starting to break down, like you got to think about the succession plan, right? Like around this age for Kyle Lowry, they were able to bring in a guy like Fred. They had even a DeLon Wright. We don't even have a DeLon Wright style prospect in the pipeline for at the guard position right now.
Banton's like a bigger DeLon, right?
DeLon was nice, man. I don't know. I think DeLon just had like a more polish and finesse to his game. I mean, he came in way older as a prospect. I think he was like 24 or maybe 23 he just had a different path to the league as Delano has. But anyway, look, we run out of time. Unfortunately, this is it's a great combo. We're just gonna have to keep having you guys back. So more make or miss Wednesdays to come. But for now, I'm gonna take a break. I'm your host, Walu. You're listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wim Liu. Big thank you to both Joseph Casciaro and Joe Wolfond of The Score for coming in and, talking Raptors. It's just a great discussion each time. So we're going to have them on quite often. But, for the second half, we are joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong. Alex, you were in the back with producer Derek Brandale. Big congrats to him and the whole Portuguese community. A lot of trucks going in circles on St. Clair. If you know, you really know. A lot of flags, a lot of honking, and just good vibes all around because that was a very impressive win by the Portuguese. So congrats to Derek. But Alex, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. And you also saw me circling around DuPont yesterday.
I did. Yeah. Yeah. What were you doing there? I was just sitting outside of Mattaccioni's, a nice little sandwich spot. Have some groceries there as well.
Yeah.
It's a nice spot. But then I was just, because again, you're never in that neighborhood. So I'm just like looking across the street and I see you in that like unmistakable Atlanta 1996 Olympic bag that you love wearing.
Oh, right.
And I was going to yell out at you, but you had your headphones in.
Yeah, I was probably bumping some Jay-Z, because that's the GOAT. Happy belated to Jay, by the way. As everybody knows, December 4th is his birthday.
Sean Carter was born December 4th, weighing in at 10 pounds, 8 ounces.
He knew how to ride a bike when he was 8.
A funny story with him is, actually, why do I know? Why do I know?
Shouts to the GOAT. No, I was going to Later Art and Style, one of my favorite stores in the city, and it's a bit outside of the downtown core, so I had to get out of my element.
No, you were in the junction. Good for you.
Yeah,
man.
I didn't know where I was because I mapped the directions there, and for some reason I was biking down this path, and then I was at the Up Express Bloor station.
Oh, the rail path.
Yes.
Wow.
And I reached a dead end, so that was a little bit concerning.
No, that's just construction. You gotta like go through the platform.
Oh, okay. But then I saw the street name DuPont and figured that was familiar grounds.
Wow.
So
if you stopped by, I would have given you better directions.
Yeah, I just went there. So
okay.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice for you to spot me in the city.
Yeah. Well, you cool. Got spotted some stuff as well. Look at the
new
fits.
Shouts to listener of the show, Juan Manuel. He sent us a very cool package. He works for this skateboarding company. I believe it might be his actually, Morning Bell. So, blessed us. I know you're wearing the tee today, so we're super appreciative. Shouts to all the listeners.
Yeah.
Let's see. 2 more minutes.
Was this a sponsorship? I don't know. It wasn't.
No.
This
is not a sponsorship. Please, nobody at Sportsnet bother me. And we also played pickup yesterday, and I just want listeners to know that Will hit a career high 4 3-pointers. Five yesterday. He was playing soccer beforehand, so it was 2-sport evening.
2-0 shutout, bro. We already talked about first segment.
For the Bo Jackson of the Raptors show, and at one point actually in the game, Will was so tired, he just did not run back on defense and allowed the other team to get a layup. And
I was playing full court.
And
man.
I was sitting on the bench and I started yelling at him. I'm like, bro, we set standards here. I was basically Fred in the players only meeting.
But then what happened?
And then Will went back the other way and hit a 3.
Not just any 3.
And stared me down and said, players only meeting that. And then did the Carmelo Anthony 3 to the dome celebration. So, the conclusion is you would be Nick Nurse's least favorite player.
Oh, absolutely. I played no defense.
You're an actual basketball player.
Every time, because I'm tall and I'm big. So I was like, I go on the post, but there was a guy who once
again, tall and
Chairman
big.
Lou.
Wow. God damn. Derek Brandale stepping up.
No, but seriously, I could not score on the post whatsoever. I got blocked a few times, and I just decided I'm just going to stay at the 3-point line. I know I can at least heave up some threes. And, it was a Hito Turkoglu-esque performance. But, high 5 threes, though. That's not bad.
No, I see some, the low post game is just the eye test is nasty on that. I don't know what you're doing in the low post. Please watch some tape of Kareem in the 80s.
Kareem, man. I might have to watch tape of Christian Koloko. I'm not even at that level.
Yeah, but you're my development project. And I'm going to develop better players in the Raptors. That's my goal.
Wow.
That's my goal.
So you're going to be Rico Hines.
Yeah. So, anyways, now it's time for Between the Lines.
Chinese Nick Nurse.
Now it's time for Between the Lines.
This is what happens when Portugal's not playing during our show.
Brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game. The Toronto Raptors are hosting the Los Angeles Lakers tonight. Anthony Davis and LeBron James are both out. So, hopefully, if you're selling your tickets to the game, you've sold them already. The line for tonight's game, Raptors, because of the injuries, are 11.5-point favorites. On paper, this makes sense. right?
I mean,
Against a shorthanded Lakers team, second
this
half
just
of a
makes
back-to-back
sense. Yeah.
without their 2 stars. Are you feeling good about giving up the 11.5 points tonight, Will?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the Raptors are playing better, right? Like, they played a much more competitive game against the Celtics, even though they lost. Obviously, they handled business against Orlando. And when you look at this Laker team, like, it's not like they don't have other players who can go off, right? You know, like, I mean, let's just look at what Westbrook did last time we were in Toronto, right? That humbled me a lot. I hope has done the same for other people
Yeah,
as well.
you humbled that wall in the radio booth.
No, that
too.
didn't happen, man.
That wall got humbled.
No. It was John Wall.
Oh, okay.
But wow, damn. But yeah, I mean, they're probably not gonna be that good without their top 2
You
players.
would expect this to be a Toronto-Orlando type matchup from like Saturday.
Yeah,
This is what I
guess
expect.
that's what I'm trying to say too.
This is what I would expect.
Yeah.
For the Raptors to take care of business. I'm a little bit disappointed because I did want to see the Raptors play a full-strength Lakers team who have been playing well since a really slow start
Right.
to the
I
season.
was curious how they're going to handle AD because they've
Yes.
actually played AD really well over the years. However, you know, yeah, I mean, he's just been on a tear.
Yeah,
lately,
and,
so.
and LeBron's one of 7 players that, you know, every Chinese basketball fan knows. In you know,
I'm
so
sure there'll be tons of
there's going to be a lot of
tons of jerseys.
disappointment that LeBron's not going to be there.
right,
You know,
right.
hopefully he'll still be there, you know, having margaritas with Drake after the game. But no, I'm disappointed because like I want the Raptors.
Margaritas by the leaders.
I want the Raptors. Yeah, I heard that. I want the Raptors to just have more tests. Like I want to
Yeah.
see them same thing as they did against the Celtics, right? Let's see what this team is about. And now they're going to play the shorthanded Lakers team and then have 2 games in Orlando.
Yeah.
So not going to really get a chance to kind of have another, like, you know, measuring stick game for a little bit.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna lie to you though. Like I don't think I minded. Like I
Okay, you
think
just want to stack up the wins.
I wouldn't mind if they stacked up the wins a little
Okay.
bit. You know, give Fred a little bit of an opportunity to find his rhythm. Continue to see Scotty get back into form. Right, Scotty's had some pretty great games against the Lakers. Right, hopefully we see more of that tonight. And yeah, I mean, the Raptors just play to what their strengths are. I think they should take this game. So even though the line is pretty high, I think I still go with the Raptors on this front.
Okay.
But
Raptors.
I'd be kind of disappointed if the Raptors
Okay.
didn't. I'm not gonna lie to you.
All right, Raptors minus 11.5 is the pick. That was Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game. Even though AD and LeBron are not going to be there tonight, we have a 6 p.m. appointment to check out the Chung Chung hot dog spot
Yeah,
in the arena.
honestly,
This is my Super Bowl.
the difference in ball talk between Cash and Wolfond and then you coming in here for 10 minutes is different, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
you're
was-
right. We have
I
an
was-
appointment to eat hot dogs before the game.
I was looking at you from behind the screen, behind the scenes during the first half,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, man, Will's really got to be a chameleon on this show, man.
Oh,
He
yeah.
got to get in his hooper bag,
No,
and then
man.
he got to get into his banter bag too, man.
No, I gotta
anyway.
be a chameleonaire to be riding with you on this show.
Ooh. So tomorrow, you know, I'll be here. We're gonna recap the Lakers Raptors
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
We're gonna
Can't wait,
recap
man.
the Chung Chung hot dogs, and then
Wow.
Faisal Kamisa, because there's no World Cup games tomorrow, is gonna come join us for a make or miss segment, and that's it.
Yeah, you heard
See
of
you
the Chung
tomorrow.
King Express. You're about to see the Chung Chung Express tomorrow on this show. But
Yo,
anyway,
The
that does it for us
Grizzly
today.
Truth.
I'm your host, Wolu, and you've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the show. Thanks again to my producer and co-host Alex Wong. Thanks to Cash and Wolfond. Thanks to our board producer Derek Brandale and Frank Baraska for helping us with the YouTube stream. We'll talk to you tomorrow.